At Morixa Tales, we believe in the power of storytelling. Our scripts weave together deep emotions and dramatic turns to deliver justice where it is most needed. Experience captivating mysteries where the truth eventually shines through, leaving a lasting impact on your heart and mind.
I sat at a fancy restaurant with my parents and sister, watching her order an $185 Wagyu steak for herself and a $16 Caesar salad for my 8-year-old son. "Salad fills you up faster than beef, sweetie," she said, smiling like she'd done him a favor. My parents laughed, not with me, at me. They saw a failure, the broke one. The charity case who should feel grateful just to be there. What they didn't know, I had more power than they'd ever imagined. 1 week later, their world collapsed, and when they called voices breaking desperate begging, I watched my phone light up and let it ring. Thank you for being here until the very end. Tell me in the comments, where did you hear about this story? Your engagement means everything, and I'd love to connect with you. Disclaimer: some elements here are fictionalized for storytelling and educational value. Any resemblance to actual names or locations is unintentional. But the message behind it all, that's what truly matters. The waiter placed a Caesar salad in front of my 8-year-old son, not a steak, not the butter-poached lobster tail my sister had just ordered, not even the seared scallops that would have been appropriate for a child at Muss, a Boston steakhouse, where the average entree cost more than most people's weekly grocery bill. A Caesar salad, $16, the cheapest thing on the menu. Julian looked up at me with those wide brown eyes, and I saw the question he didn't ask. "Why, Mom?" I squeezed his small hand across the white tablecloth. "It's okay, baby. Eat." Across from us, my sister Amber, 2 years younger but forever Daddy's favorite, smiled that sugar-sweet smile she'd perfected over 32 years. Her honey blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves from some overpriced Newberry Street salon. Her manicured nails matched the Chanel blouse she'd probably charged to a maxed-out credit card. "Caesar salad fills you up faster than steak, sweetie," she said, reacting over to ruffle Julian's hair like he was a puppy. He pulled back. My jaw tightened. "Besides, it's healthier for growing boys." Right, Brandon. Brandon Whitfield, my brother-in-law, though I use that term loosely, barely glanced up from his phone. 38 years old, tall, polished in a way that screamed borrowed money. Designer watch, tailored suit, leather shoes worth more than the monthly payment on whatever luxury car he was leasing this month. He worked at Quantum Dynamics, Boston's tech darling, and never let anyone forget it. Yeah, definitely," he muttered, still scrolling. Then his eyes landed on me with that look, the one that said he was better than me. "You know, Elise, if you're worried about the cost, I'd be happy to cover Julian's meal. I know things have been tight for you." Tight. I almost laughed. Brandon Whitfield thought things were tight for me. The same man driving a leased Mercedes GLE 450 he couldn't afford. The same man who'd embezzled $450,000 from Quantum Dynamics over 18 months, though he didn't know I knew that yet. And here I sat, CEO and founder of Sentinel Advisory Group, the crisis management firm Fortune 500 companies called when they needed to bury scandals or root out corruption. My company was worth $50 million. I owned a penthouse in the Seaport District overlooking Boston Harbor. I drove a Bentley Flying Spur, though tonight I'd deliberately taken an old Chrysler 200 playing the part they expected. The struggling single mother. The sister who'd never measured up. "That's very generous, Brandon," I said softly. "Thank you." My mother, Diane Bennett, 60 years old and still clinging to junior league social circles from the 80s, beamed at Brandon like he'd offered a kidney. "Isn't he wonderful? Elise, Brandon just got promoted again. He's overseeing Quantum's entire East Coast operations now." "Director of Strategic Partnerships," Brandon corrected, puffing up. "Essentially VP level. Mr. Pearson, William Pearson, the CEO, personally selected me." I knew William Pearson. I'd spoken to him 3 days ago about the forensic audit my company was running. An audit with Brandon Whitfield's name stamped across hundreds of fraudulent transactions. But I just nodded. Impressive. They're giving him a corner office. Amber added, voice dripping pride. She grabbed Brandon's hand, her diamond ring catching light, 3 carats princess cut, probably financed at 18% interest, with harbor views. My father, Raymond Bennett, 65 and recently retired from middle management at an insurance company, raised his scotch. To Brandon, the most successful son-in-law a man could ask for. Julian poked at his salad, shoulders hunched. I watched my father toast Brandon. I watched my mother gaze at Amber with adoration she'd never once shown me. I watched Amber's twin sons, Cody and Cameron, 10 years old and already entitled, ignore their own salads to steal bites of their father's $185 Wagyu, and I smiled, because in a matter of days this fantasy would crash down. The corner office Brandon bragged about, he'd never see it. The promotion rescinded, the Mercedes repossessed, and that house my parents just signed over to Amber in a quit-claim deed, thinking they were dodging estate taxes. It came with a $180,000 tax lien, a lien I now owned. James, our waiter, probably a BU grad student, appeared at my elbow. "And for you, ma'am, Caesar salad," I said quietly. "Thank you." Diane's eyebrows shot up. "Elise, are you sure? It's been so long since we've all been together. Order something more substantial." Translation: Don't embarrass us by being cheap. The salad is perfect, I replied, meeting her eyes. Julian and I will share. Amber and Brandon exchanged glances. I saw it, that flicker of pity mixed with superiority. Poor Elise. Can't even afford a steak at her own family dinner. Let them think it. Let them believe I was struggling, that I was still the girl who got pregnant at 26 and refused to name the father, the daughter who embarrassed them with an out-of-wedlock baby. Let them think I was scraping by while Amber thrived. Because the truth, the devastating truth they'd never see coming, was that I'd spent 8 years building something they couldn't comprehend. I'd clawed out of poverty without a man's help or my parents' approval, with my own mind, my own strategy, my own ruthless determination to never be underestimated again. And now I'd teach them what it cost to underestimate me. Brandon's phone buzzed. He frowned, then looked at James. "Could you bring the check early meeting tomorrow?" "Of course, sir." I reached for my water glass, watching my reflection in the crystal. In a few days, I'd walk into the Quantum Dynamics Gala at the Langham wearing a $300,000 Oscar de la Renta gown and 30 carats of diamonds. I'd stand on that stage while William Pearson introduced me as his strategic partner, the woman who just saved them from $500,000 in fraud. And Brandon Whitfield would finally understand who I was. But tonight I was still just Elise, the struggling single mom, the disappointing daughter, the sister who couldn't keep up. I smiled and stayed silent. They had no idea who I really was, or what I was about to do. James returned with a small black leather folder and placed it discreetly beside Brandon's elbow, the check. I watched Brandon reach for it without looking, the casual gesture of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. He flipped it open and I saw his face change, just slightly, a tightening around his eyes, a pause that lasted half a second too long. $3,200 for 7 people. For Wagyu and lobster and scotch and wine and Caesar salads that cost $16 each. For an evening of pretending we were all one happy family. Brandon pulled out his wallet and slid a black credit card into the folder. "Thanks, man," he said to James, his voice steady, still playing the part. James took it and disappeared. Across the table, Raymond was telling some story about his golf game. Diane was laughing. Amber was checking her phone, her thumb scrolling through Instagram, probably posting photos of tonight's dinner with hashtags about family and blessings and gratitude. None of them noticed Brandon's jaw clench. I noticed. 2 minutes later, James returned. He leaned down close to Brandon's ear, speaking in that low professional tone waiters use when they have to deliver bad news. "I'm sorry, sir, the card was declined. Do you have another form of payment?" The table went silent. Brandon's face flushed red. That's impossible. There must be some mistake. "I ran it twice, sir," James said quietly, apologetically. "Would you like to try another card?" I watched my brother-in-law's hands shake as he fumbled through his wallet. He pulled out another card, a Visa. James took it and left again. Amber leaned in, whispering, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Brandon hissed. "Just a glitch. The bank probably flagged it for fraud protection or something, but I knew better. I knew exactly why that card had been declined. Because 4 days ago, Quantum Dynamics had quietly frozen all discretionary spending accounts pending the results of an internal audit. An audit I was running. An audit that had already flagged Brandon's accounts for suspicious activity. He didn't know that yet. James returned. Same apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, sir. This one was also declined." Brandon stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "This is ridiculous. I'm a director at Quantum Dynamics. I have a 7-figure credit line. There's obviously a problem with your system." "Brandon," Raymond said, standing as well. "No." Brandon's voice was sharp. He was breathing hard now, sweat beading at his temples. "I've got it. I just need to call the bank." He strode toward the restaurant's entrance phone already pressed to his ear. The table sat in awkward silence. Diane cleared her throat. Amber looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Cody and Cameron were oblivious, fighting over the last piece of bread. And Julian. My sweet Julian, who'd sat through this entire dinner eating a $16 salad while everyone else feasted. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes and whispered, "Mom, are we in trouble?" "No, baby," I said softly. "We're not." I caught James's attention. He approached immediately. "I'll take care of it," I said, pulling out my wallet. I slid my American Express Centurion card, the black card invitation only no spending limit, across the table. "Please run this. And add a 25% gratuity." James's eyes widened slightly when he saw the card. He knew what it meant. "Of course, ma'am. Thank you." He was back in less than a minute. "Approved. Thank you very much, Ms. Bennett." I signed the receipt quickly. $3,200 plus an $800 tip. $4,000 total. I'd spent more than that on Julian's birthday party last month. Brandon returned just as James was handing me back my card. His face was still red. "The bank says there's some kind of hold on my accounts. Corporate policy or something. They're looking into it." He glanced around the table. "Did someone take care of the check?" "Elise paid," Diane said, and I heard it in her voice, that mixture of surprise and something else. Disapproval, maybe, as if I'd embarrassed Brandon by helping. Brandon's eyes found mine. For a moment I saw something flicker there. Confusion, suspicion. Then he forced a smile. "Thanks, Elise. I'll Venmo you tomorrow." "Don't worry about it," I said. "No, I insist." He was already standing helping Amber with her coat. "Come on, boys, let's go." Raymond and Diane followed, gathering their things. My father clapped Brandon on the shoulder. "These banks and their fraud alerts. Happens to me all the time." I stood slowly helping Julian with his jacket. "You coming?" Amber asked, pausing at the door. "In a minute," I said. "I need to use the restroom." They didn't wait. Of course they didn't. I watched through the restaurant's tall windows as they walked to the parking garage across the street. Brandon's Mercedes GLE, $450 leased, I knew, at $900 a month he couldn't afford, was parked on the second level. They all piled in. Raymond in front, Diane, Amber, and the twins in back. No room for Julian and me. Or maybe they just didn't think to offer. The Mercedes pulled out into the street, and that's when the rain started. June in Boston. Warm days, sudden storms. It came down hard and fast, the kind of rain that soaked through clothes in seconds. Julian and I stood under the restaurant's awning, watching taillights disappear down Beacon Street. "Mom." Julian's voice was small. "Why didn't they wait for us?" I knelt down eye level with my son and zipped his jacket all the way up. "Because they don't think about us, baby. But that's okay. We don't need them to." I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text. "Michael, Moo Restaurant, 15 Beacon, now." Less than 4 minutes later, a Bentley Flying Spur midnight blue with cream leather interior and a hood ornament that cost more than Brandon's monthly lease payment pulled up to the curb. Michael Brooks, my driver of 6 years, stepped out with an umbrella and opened the rear door. He was a tall man in his 50s, former Secret Service, who'd seen me at my worst and my best and never once questioned either. "Ms. Bennett," he said, nodding. "Master Julian?" "Thank you, Michael." Julian's eyes went wide as he slid into the car. The heated seats, the ambient lighting, the bottle of sparkling water waiting in the console with 2 crystal glasses. As Michael pulled into traffic, I looked back at Moo Restaurant. Through the rain-streaked window, I could see James clearing our table. I could see the seat where Brandon had sat sweating and panicking over a declined credit card. I could see the beginning of his end. I opened my phone and pulled up an encrypted messaging app. Only 3 contacts. One of them was Nicole Foster, my executive assistant, and the only person who knew every detail of what was about to happen. I typed 4 words, "Activate Protocol Obsidian." 3 dots appeared immediately, then confirmed, beginning phase 2. I set the phone down and looked at Julian, who was watching the rain slide down the window, the city lights turning each drop into a prism. "Mom," he said softly, "why do they treat us like that?" "Because they don't see us clearly, baby. But soon they will." Soon they'd see everything. Monday morning, 8 o'clock sharp. My office on the 23rd floor of the Prudential Tower looked out over Back Bay, the Charles River, a silver ribbon in the early light. The coffee in my hand was still hot, Ethiopian single-origin black, the way I'd trained myself to drink it when cream and sugar felt like luxuries I couldn't afford. Those days were over. Now I stood in a corner office worth more per square foot than my parents' entire house. Floor-to-ceiling windows, custom millwork, a Nakashima desk that cost $60,000. And in front of that desk, waiting with an iPad and 3 color-coded folders, was the only person who knew exactly what I was about to do. Nicole Foster, 31, sharp as a blade with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She'd been with me for 4 years, hired away from a competing firm with double her salary, and a promise she'd never be underestimated again. She'd grown up in a family not unlike mine. She knew what it meant to be invisible. That's why I trusted her. "Protocol Obsidian is active," Nicole said. She tapped her iPad and the wall-mounted screen lit up with a flowchart. 3 layers, 3 objectives, 1 outcome. Legal reviewed everything. It's airtight. I set my coffee down and moved closer. "Walk me through it," I said. "Every detail. Layer 1 exposure. Brandon Whitfield." She began. His face appeared on screen, a corporate headshot, all polished smile and borrowed confidence. Over 18 months, he's embezzled $450,000 from Quantum Dynamics through fraudulent vendor invoices and wire transfers to shell companies. She swiped to the next slide. Bank statements, transaction records, forged signatures. I'd seen it all, but watching it laid out like this clean, damning irrefutable was satisfying. "The forensic audit is 98% complete," Nicole continued. "We've traced every dollar. 3 LLCs under different names, 1 in Delaware, 2 in Nevada. Payments for services never rendered, consulting fees for consultants who don't exist, textbook embezzlement, and he wasn't even careful." "Arrogance," I said quietly. "He thought no one was watching. He thought he was smarter than the system." Nicole's voice was clinical. "He wasn't. William Pearson gets the final report Wednesday. By Thursday morning, Brandon's terminated. Friday, the board refers it to federal prosecutors. $450,000, enough to ruin a man's life. Enough for 5 to 7 years in prison. Enough to make sure he never worked in corporate America again." "Layer 2, I said. "Layer 2. Asset seizure." Nicole pulled up a photo of 285 Chestnut Street in Brookline, my childhood home. "Your parents executed a quitclaim deed 2 weeks ago, transferring ownership to Amber Whitfield." "Tax avoidance," I said. "They think they're protecting the asset." "Exactly. But what they don't know." She pulled up a document stamped with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts seal, is that the property has an outstanding tax lien of $180,000. "Your father stopped paying property taxes 3 years ago. The city placed a lien last year." I'd known this for months. Known it the moment I'd run a background check after Raymond asked for a loan he never intended to repay. I'd seen the lien, the ignored notices, the foreclosure timeline, and I'd made a decision. 2 weeks ago, Nicole said. You purchased that lien from the city for $195,000. Under Massachusetts law, if the lien isn't satisfied within 90 days, you have the right to foreclose. Amber signed the deed, I said. She inherited the debt, not my parents. Nicole smiled, not kindly. Amber Whitfield now owns a house with a $180,000 lien attached, and you own that lien. She has 87 days to pay. After that, the house is yours. I turned to the window. Somewhere out there, Amber was probably still asleep in that house wrapped in sheets bought with maxed-out credit cards. She had no idea the walls were crumbling. Layer 3. I said, Layer 3 public reckoning. Saturday night, Nicole said. Quantum Dynamics Gala at the Langham. 500 guests, C-suite executives, board members, investors, media. William Pearson announces you as Sentinel's CEO and Quantum strategic partner. That's when he presents the audit findings. In front of everyone. In front of everyone, Nicole confirmed. Brandon will be there. Amber. Your parents Pearson sent them invitations because Brandon listed them as family VIPs. They'll watch him get exposed, watch security escort him out, and they'll finally understand who you are. The gala, the lights, the stage, the moment when my father would reconcile the daughter he dismissed with the CEO standing before him, when Amber would realize the sister she'd pitied was the architect of her destruction. There's one more thing, Nicole said quietly. She pulled up a medical invoice dated 4 months ago. Massachusetts General Hospital, cardiac surgery, Raymond Bennett, $45,000, insurance covered $30,000. The remaining $15,000 was paid by an anonymous donor. She looked at me. I said nothing. That was you, she said. He's still my father, I said finally. No matter how he treated me, I wasn't going to let him die because he couldn't afford surgery. Nicole nodded slowly. That makes you better than all of them. I didn't respond. My phone buzzed. Nicole glanced at it. William Pearson's office. He wants to meet. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. About the audit. Probably, Nicole hesitated, though his assistant said it was personal. Personal. That was unusual. In 4 months of working with Quantum, I'd only dealt with him through official channels, board presentations, audit updates, legal reviews, never one-on-one. Set it up, I said. Nicole made a note. Anything else? I looked back at the screen, at the 3 layers, at Brandon and Amber and the house that would soon be mine, at the web that would bring them all down. No, I said. That's everything. But it wasn't everything. There was one more thing Nicole didn't know yet. One more secret buried deeper than Protocol Obsidian itself. A secret about William Pearson. About why he'd really hired Sentinel. About a DNA test and a phone call and a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about where I came from. But that truth could wait. For now, I had a family to dismantle. Tuesday morning, I watched from my car as Amber walked into Morrison & Associates, a law firm 3 blocks from Brookline Village. Nicole had sent the alert at 7 a.m. target en route to attorney's office. Deed signing scheduled 9 a.m. I'd parked across the street in my Chrysler 200, the old one, the forgettable one, and waited. Watched Brandon pull up in the leased Mercedes, watched him hold the door for Amber like a gentleman, watched them disappear inside. They were finalizing the quitclaim deed, the one that would transfer ownership of 285 Chestnut Street from Raymond and Diane Bennett to Amber Whitfield, the one that came with a $180,000 tax lien they knew nothing about, the one that would make Amber responsible for a debt she couldn't pay. My phone buzzed. Nicole. Deed executed and notarized. Recorded with the county clerk at 9:47 a.m. It's official. I typed back lien status. Her response came immediately. You own it. 85 days until foreclosure window opens. Through the law office window, I could see them shaking hands with the attorney. Brandon was smiling, probably already calculating how much money they'd saved on estate taxes. Amber looked relieved. They thought they'd just secured their future. They had no idea they'd just signed it away. The next morning, Wednesday, my phone rang at 6:30 a.m. I was already awake, sitting on my penthouse balcony with coffee, watching the sunrise paint Boston Harbor in shades of gold. Julian was still asleep in his room, his sketchbook open on the nightstand beside his bed. The caller ID said Mom. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Hello, Mom. Elise. Diane's voice was bright, artificially cheerful in the way it always was when she wanted something. I hope I'm not calling too early. It's fine. I was already up. Of course you were. You always were an early riser. She said it like it was a character flaw. Listen, honey, I'm calling about your father's birthday party. This Saturday. We're having a little celebration at the house. Saturday, 4 days from now, the same day as the Quantum Dynamics Gala. That's nice, I said neutrally. Well, the thing is, we're expecting quite a few people. Family, some of your father's old colleagues, and Amber's been so busy with the boys, and I'm not as young as I used to be. I waited. Let her keep digging. So I was hoping you might be able to come by a bit early and help us set up. You know, with the food and the drinks. We really could use an extra pair of hands. There it was. Not we'd love for you to celebrate with us. Not your father would be so happy to see you. Just, we need help. We need someone to serve. What time? I asked. Oh, wonderful. Could you be there around 2? The party starts at 4, but we'll need time to get everything ready. And maybe you could wear something practical. Something you don't mind getting dirty. Something practical. Something I don't mind getting dirty. Translation: don't show up looking like you belong at the party. Show up looking like the help. I'll be there, I said. Thank you so much, honey. This means the world to us. Oh, and bring Julian, of course. The boys would love to see their cousin. The boys who'd torn up his sketchbook. The boys who'd called him poor. Of course, I said. We'll see you Saturday. I hung up before she could say anything else. For a long moment, I sat there, phone in my hand, watching the sun climb higher. Behind me, I heard Julian's door open, small footsteps padding across the hardwood floor. Mom! His voice was sleepy. Who were you talking to? I turned and smiled at him. He was wearing his favorite pajamas, the ones with rockets on them, and his hair was sticking up in about 7 different directions. Your grandmother, I said. We're invited to Grandpa's birthday party on Saturday. Julian's face fell slightly. Do we have to go? Not for long, I said. Just for a little while. Will Cody and Cameron be there? Probably. He was quiet for a moment. Then, will they be mean again? I set my coffee down and held out my arms. He came over and climbed into my lap, even though he was getting too big for it, even though his legs dangled over the side of the chair. Listen to me, I said, smoothing down his ridiculous hair. Saturday is going to be a very important day. And yes, we're going to that party. But I promise you, after Saturday, things are going to be different. Different? How? Different better, I said. Trust me. He nodded against my shoulder. He always trusted me, even when I didn't deserve it. After breakfast, after I dropped Julian at his summer program, I went back to my office. Nicole was already there, pulling up the schedule for the Quantum Dynamics Gala on her tablet. Your mother called this morning, I said. Nicole looked up. About Raymond's birthday party, Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. I sat down at my desk. She wants me to come early and help set up. Nicole's expression didn't change, but I saw the flash of anger in her eyes. She understood exactly what that meant. The gala starts at 7, she said. I know. You're going to both. Yes. So you'll go to the house at 2, play the part they expect, then leave in time to get ready for the gala. Exactly. I pulled up the timeline. I'll arrive at the house at 2 p.m., stay until 5:30. That gives me 90 minutes to get home, shower, change, and be at the Langham by 7. Tight schedule, Nicole said. I've worked with tighter. She nodded slowly. Then, what are you going to wear? To the house, I mean. I smiled. Something practical, something I don't mind getting dirty. Nicole understood immediately. You're going to play the servant. I'm going to let them see exactly what they think I am, I said. Right before I show them what I actually am. The blue uniform, Nicole said. From the catering company we used for the Goldman event last year. It's still in storage. Perfect. Nicole made a note. I'll have it cleaned and pressed, delivered to your place Friday night. I looked back at the timeline on my screen. At Saturday divided into blocks of time. 2 p.m. to 5:30 Raymond's birthday party. 7 p.m. to midnight Quantum Dynamics Gala. In between transformation. From servant to CEO. From invisible to undeniable. From daughter to reckoning. Nicole, I said quietly. When I walk into that house on Saturday, they're going to see exactly what they've always seen. Someone small, someone grateful, someone they can use. And when you walk into the Langham, I smiled, they'll see everything. I arrived at 285 Chestnut Street at exactly 2 o'clock, wearing a blue polyester uniform that cost $39 and smelled faintly of industrial detergent. The house looked the same as it always had. Red brick, colonial, white trim, black shutters, a magnolia tree in the front yard that bloomed every spring. My father had planted it the year Amber was born. He'd never planted anything for me. I parked the Chrysler at the curb, not in the driveway, because the help didn't park in the driveway and walk to the back entrance. The kitchen door was unlocked. Inside, Diane was arranging flowers. She looked up. Her eyes swept over the uniform, and I saw the flash of satisfaction. "Oh, good you're here," she said. "The caterers dropped off appetizers. They need to be plated and taken to the patio, and the bar needs setting up. Bottles are by the back door. No hello, no thank you, just orders." "Of course," I said quietly. Julian stood behind me, small and uncertain. Diane barely glanced at him. "Julian can play with his cousins," she said, waving toward the backyard. "They're by the pool." I felt Julian's hand tighten around mine. He didn't want to go. I didn't want him to either. But this was part of it. Part of what they needed to see before everything changed. "Go ahead, baby," I whispered. "I'll be right here if you need me." He nodded and walked slowly toward the French doors. I turned to the appetizers. Shrimp cocktail, brie en croûte, prosciutto wrapped asparagus, the kind of food my mother served when she wanted to impress people. I spent the next hour arranging food on silver platters and carrying them outside to where 40 guests had gathered under a white tent. My father's old colleagues, neighbors, Diane's bridge club friends. People who'd known me my entire life and now watched me serve drinks without recognition. Or maybe they recognized me perfectly. Maybe this was exactly where they'd always expected me to end up. Amber found me 20 minutes in when I was refilling the ice bucket. "Oh, look," she said loudly. "Elise is playing maid. How sweet." She wore a white sundress that probably cost $300 and held champagne I'd poured 10 minutes earlier. Her friends laughed on cue. "Just helping out," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "It's so good of you to pitch in," Amber said, dripping false sweetness. "Mom and Dad really appreciate it, especially since, well, you know, since you're family. Since you're family, but not family enough to be treated like a guest." I smiled and said nothing. Amber drifted away, satisfied. Through the window, I could see Julian sitting alone at a small table near the edge of the patio. He had his sketchbook out, drawing, trying to make himself invisible. And then I saw them. Cody and Cameron, 10 years old, identical blonde hair and identical mean smirks. They approached Julian's table like sharks. I started moving toward the door, but I was too late. Cody grabbed Julian's sketchbook. Cameron laughed. Julian reached for it, but Cody held it high, taunting. I could see Julian's face crumpling, trying not to cry. I pushed through the doors and crossed the patio in 6 steps. "Give it back," I said quietly. Cody turned. He was holding the sketchbook open now, showing Cameron a drawing. They were both laughing. "We're just looking," Cody said. "Give it back." Something in my voice registered because Cody handed the sketchbook to Julian, but not before ripping out the page and crumpling it in his fist. "Oops," he said. I stepped forward, and for a moment I forgot where I was. I forgot the blue uniform and the party and the plan. I forgot everything except my son's crushed expression and the ball of paper in Cody's hand. "Elise." Amber's voice, sharp and cold. I turned. She was standing 5 feet away, arms crossed. The boys were just playing," she said. "Don't make a scene. Your son's just—" I said, "Don't make a scene." Amber's smile was pleasant, but her eyes were ice. "Remember why you're here. To serve. To know my place." I looked at Julian clutching his sketchbook, tears running silently down his cheeks. I looked at Cody and Cameron already moving away unpunished. I looked at Amber in her white dress, daring me to cause trouble, and I smiled. "You're right," I said softly. "I'm sorry." Amber looked surprised that I'd backed down so easily, but she recovered quickly. "Good. Now I think some people need drink refills." I nodded and walked back to the bar. But first, I stopped by Julian's table and knelt down. "2 more hours," I whispered. "Can you be brave for 2 more hours?" He nodded, wiping his eyes. "What happens in 2 hours?" "Everything changes," I said. "I promise." I kissed the top of his head and went back to serving champagne to people who didn't see me. Around 4 o'clock, when most guests were sufficiently drunk and distracted, I slipped away and went inside. Raymond's study was at the end of the upstairs hall. The door was closed but not locked. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood desk, leather chair, filing cabinets, framed photos of Amber at every age graduation wedding the twins. Not a single photo of me or Julian. I pulled out my phone and started photographing. Tax returns, bank statements, the quitclaim deed documents with Amber's signature, property tax notices Raymond had ignored for 3 years, letters from the city about the lien, all of it. Evidence, proof, ammunition. I was finishing when I heard footsteps in the hall. I closed the cabinet quickly and stepped behind the door just as it opened. Brandon. He walked to the desk, picked up his phone from where he'd left it charging, and turned to leave. He passed within 2 feet of me, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. He didn't see me. People like Brandon never saw people in blue uniforms. He left. I waited 30 seconds, then slipped back downstairs. The party lasted until 6. I served and cleaned and smiled and stayed invisible while my family celebrated and laughed and treated me like hired help. At 5:30, I found Julian and told him it was time to go. Diane caught me on the way out. "Thank you so much for today, Elise," she said. "You were such a help. We really couldn't have done it without you. We really couldn't have done it without you. Like I was the caterer." "Of course, Mom," I said. She smiled and went back to her guests. In the car, I took off the blue uniform jacket and folded it carefully, set it on the passenger seat. Julian was quiet beside me, clutching his sketchbook. "Mom," he said softly, "why did we have to go to that party?" "Because sometimes," I said, starting the engine, "people need to see who they think you are before you show them who you really are." "I don't understand." "You will," I said. "In about 2 hours you will." I pulled away from the curb and drove toward home, toward my penthouse, toward my closet where a $300,000 gown was waiting. Toward the truth. They thought the blue uniform was my place. They were wrong. At 3:30 that afternoon, Julian sat alone at a small wrought iron table near the edge of my parents' patio, hunched over his sketchbook. I could see him from the outdoor bar where I was refilling ice buckets. The other children were playing Marco Polo in the pool while Julian sat by himself drawing. He'd always been like that. Quiet, observant, more comfortable with a pencil than a ball. At 8 years old, he already drew with the kind of focus most adults never achieved. Today, he was sketching the magnolia tree my father had planted for Amber. I watched him shade the petals, his small hand moving carefully. For a moment, he looked peaceful. That's when I saw Cody and Cameron climbing out of the pool. They were dripping wet, wrapped in shark print towels. 10 years old, identical. And I knew the way you know when lightning is about to strike, that they were headed for Julian. I started moving toward him, but I was carrying champagne glasses and had to set them down first. By the time I'd put the tray on the bar, Cody had already reached Julian's table. "What you drawing?" Cody said. Julian looked up startled. "Just a tree." "Can I see?" Julian hesitated. He'd learned to be cautious around his cousins, but he was 8, and he wanted to believe the best in people. He turned the sketchbook around. Cody looked at the drawing, then picked up the sketchbook. "Hey," Julian started. "This is pretty good," Cody said, but his voice was mocking. "Cameron, come look at this." Julian made a picture. Cameron appeared grinning. "Wow, that's so artistic." The way he said artistic made it sound like an insult. Julian stood up, reaching for his sketchbook. "Can I have it back, please?" "Sure," Cody said. He held it out, then pulled it back. "Wait, let me look at the other pictures first." He started flipping through the pages. Julian had been working in that sketchbook for 3 months. Every page was filled. Drawings of our penthouse view, the Boston skyline, the boats in the harbor, me sitting on the balcony with coffee, his whole world captured in pencil and charcoal. "These are all so boring," Cameron said. "Don't you draw anything cool like dinosaurs or superheroes?" "I like drawing real things," Julian said quietly. "Real things are boring," Cody said. "You're boring." I was 15 feet away now, pushing through guests, blocking my path. "Give it back," Julian said. His voice was shaking. "Please." Cody looked at his brother. Cameron looked back. And in that moment, I saw them make a decision. Cody grabbed the front cover with both hands. "No!" Julian lunged forward, and Cody ripped. The sound of tearing paper cut through the party like a scream. Cody tore out the first page, the magnolia tree drawing, and crumpled it. Then he tore out the next page, and the next. Cameron grabbed the other side and pulled. The spine split. Pages scattered. Julian was crying now openly, desperately reaching for the pages as they fell like wounded birds onto the patio stones. I dropped the wine bottles I was carrying. They shattered red wine spreading across the patio like blood, but I didn't care. I crossed the remaining distance in 4 steps and grabbed Cody's wrist. "Let go!" My voice was so low, so cold that Cody actually flinched. He dropped the sketchbook. What was left of it? I knelt down and started gathering the torn pages. Julian was sobbing, trying to smooth out the crumpled drawings, but they were ruined. 3 months of work, destroyed in 30 seconds. I pulled him into my arms and held him while he cried into my blue uniform. "Elise, what happened?" Diane's voice. She'd appeared drawn by the sound of breaking bottles. "They tore up Julian's sketchbook," I said. "Oh." Diane looked at the scattered pages, then at the twins. "Well, I'm sure they didn't mean to." "They meant to." Amber's voice now. She'd materialized beside Diane, arms crossed. "The boys were just playing," Amber said. "Julian probably—" "Your son's destroyed his sketchbook," I said. "On purpose." "Elise." Amber's voice sharpened. "They're children. Children play rough sometimes. Don't make a big deal out of—" "They ripped up 3 months of his work." "It's just drawings," Amber said. "He can make more." Just drawings. Like the hours Julian had spent on each page meant nothing. Raymond appeared then, drink in hand, surveying the scene with mild annoyance. "What's all the commotion?" he asked. "Julian's upset because the boys tore up his sketchbook," Diane explained. Raymond looked at Julian still crying in my arms, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not sympathy, disappointment. In Julian. "Boys will be boys," Raymond said. "Maybe if Julian wasn't so sensitive, he'd be able to play with the other kids instead of sitting alone drawing pictures all day." Maybe if Julian wasn't so sensitive. Victim blaming from his own grandfather. "He's 8 years old," I said quietly. "I know how old he is," Raymond said. "I'm just saying maybe he needs to toughen up a bit. Learn to take a joke." A joke. Destroying a child's artwork was a joke. I looked at my father, at my sister, at my mother, at the twins already wandering back toward the pool. "You're right," I said, standing up with Julian. "Come on, baby, let's go inside." I took Julian to the downstairs bathroom and cleaned his face with a cool washcloth while he hiccuped and tried to stop crying. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "For what?" "For crying." Grandpa said, "I'm too sensitive." I cupped his face in my hands and made him look at me. "You are not too sensitive," I said. "You feel things deeply. You create beautiful things. That's not weakness, that's strength. Then why did they? Because they don't understand. Because they're small-minded and cruel and they can't create anything themselves, so they destroy what other people make. I smoothed his hair back. But in a few hours, they're going to learn something very important. What? That the people they underestimate are the ones they should fear most. I left him in the bathroom and went back outside to collect the torn pages. I was kneeling on the patio, gathering them into a pile, when I heard Brandon's voice from inside the house. I froze. The study window was open just above where I was crouched. I could hear him perfectly. "Yeah, I'm still at the party. No, I can't really talk right now." A pause. "What do you mean there's an audit who authorized that?" Another pause. "Sentinel Advisory Group. Who the hell are they?" My heart stopped. I could hear typing. He was on his phone looking something up. "Crisis management firm based in Boston," Brandon read aloud. "Specializes in forensic audits and corporate investigations." A pause. "Does it say who the CEO is?" I held my breath. "No photo on the website. Interesting. Okay, look, I'll deal with this Monday. It's probably just routine." But his voice wasn't confident. It was worried. Footsteps. Moving away from the window. I stayed frozen for another 30 seconds before I finished gathering the torn pages. My hands were shaking as I put them in my purse. Evidence. Proof. Fuel for the fire I was about to light. Brandon was getting close to the truth. But close wasn't enough. And by the time he figured it out, it would already be too late. I checked my watch. 3:45. In 3.5 hours, I'd walk into the Langham wearing diamonds and justice. I stood up, smoothed down my blue uniform, and went back to serving champagne. This ends at the gala, I thought. This all ends at the gala. Sunday morning, 10 o'clock sharp. I sat in the conference room on the 23rd floor of Sentinel's headquarters, a stack of documents spread across the polished mahogany table. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston Harbor glittered in the late June sunshine. Inside, the air conditioning hummed quietly, and the only other sound was the soft rustle of paper as I turned pages. Nicole sat across from me, her iPad open, tracking every detail. And at the head of the table sat David Bowie, the attorney who'd spent the past 2 weeks orchestrating the most elegant legal trap I'd ever constructed. David was 52 Harvard Law with 30 years of experience in Massachusetts real estate and tax law. He wore wire-rimmed glasses and had the calm, methodical demeanor that came from decades navigating complex legal frameworks. I'd hired him 4 years ago when I realized crisis management wasn't just about controlling narratives, it was about controlling outcomes. And outcomes required precision. "Walk me through it one more time," I said, even though I'd memorized every detail, but I needed to hear it aloud. Needed to confirm every piece was exactly where it needed to be. David nodded and pulled the first document from the stack. A quit-claim deed executed and notarized on Tuesday, June 10th at 9:47 in the morning. The quit-claim deed transfers all ownership interest in 285 Chestnut Street, Brookline, from Raymond and Diane Bennett to Amber Whitfield. David began. His voice was measured professorial. "Your parents signed over the property willingly, believing they were engaging in estate planning to avoid future inheritance taxes." I looked at the signatures at the bottom. Raymond Bennett. Diane Bennett, witnessed by a notary public, legal, binding, irreversible. "And Amber signed as well," I said. "Correct." David turned to the second page. Amber Whitfield accepted full ownership Tuesday morning. The deed was recorded with the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds at 10:15 a.m. As of that moment, Amber Whitfield became the sole legal owner, which means she also became responsible for all encumbrances attached to the property, I said. "Precisely." David pulled out another document with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts seal stamped across the top, including the outstanding tax lien. There it was, the heart of the trap. The property tax lien filed by the city of Brookline on March 15th of the previous year. Raymond Bennett had stopped paying property taxes in 2022. The city had sent notices, multiple notices, all ignored. After 18 months of non-payment, the city placed a lien on the property for $180,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. My father had ignored those notices too, and now the debt belonged to Amber. "Explain the mechanics," I said to David. For the record, he adjusted his glasses. Under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 60, when a property owner fails to pay property taxes, the municipality can place a tax lien on the property. That lien takes priority over almost all other claims mortgages, home equity lines, everything. It's a debt secured by the property itself. And the city can sell that lien, I said. Correct. Municipalities often sell tax liens to private investors to recoup lost revenue immediately. The investor pays the city the full lien amount plus a premium. In exchange, the investor becomes the lien holder, and the lien holder has what rights? The lien holder has the right to collect the debt from the property owner. If the debt isn't satisfied within the statutory redemption period, 90 days in Massachusetts, the lien holder can initiate foreclosure proceedings and take ownership of the property. Nicole looked up from her iPad. In plain English, if Amber doesn't pay Elise $180,000 in the next 83 days, Elise can take the house. Precisely, David said. I picked up the lien assignment document. The one showing the city of Brookline had sold the tax lien to Bennett Holdings, LLC, a shell company I'd created specifically for this purpose for $195,000. I'd paid $15,000 over the lien amount as a premium to expedite the sale. The transaction had been recorded on May 20th, 6 weeks ago, long before my parents ever thought to transfer the property to Amber. They had no idea the lien existed, I said quietly. The notices were sent to 285 Chestnut Street. David confirmed. But according to the Postal Service, your father marked them all as junk mail and threw them away. He never opened a single one. Of course he hadn't. Raymond Bennett had spent his entire life ignoring problems and hoping they'd disappear. Bills he couldn't pay, debts he couldn't manage, responsibilities he didn't want to face. And now his willful ignorance was going to cost him everything. Does Amber know? Nicole asked. Not yet, I said. The lien is public record, but you have to know to look for it. And Amber didn't do a title search before accepting the deed. Why would she? Her parents told her it was a gift. A very expensive gift, David said dryly. She now owns a house worth approximately $700,000 with a $180,000 lien attached. What happens when she finds out? Nicole asked. She has 3 options, David said. 1, pay the full amount plus accrued interest and fees, which she doesn't have. 2, refinance the property to pay off the lien, which she can't do because her credit is destroyed, and the house has negative equity once you factor in the lien. 3, let the redemption period expire and allow for closure. And if she chooses option 3, I asked, even though I knew the answer, then you, as the lien holder, can file for foreclosure. The property goes through a judicial process, but given the clear priority of a tax lien, it's essentially a formality. Within 6 months, you'd own 285 Chestnut Street outright. My childhood home, the place where I'd spent 18 years feeling like a guest, the house with the magnolia tree my father had planted for Amber but never for me, the rooms where I'd been dismissed and diminished and told I'd never be enough. It would be mine. Nicole leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It's genius, she said. It's completely legal, and it's absolutely irreversible. Unless she comes up with $180,000 in the next 3 months, David added. But given that her husband is about to be terminated and arrested, and her personal finances are essentially non-existent, I'd say the probability of payment is less than 1%. I gathered the documents and returned them to their folder. Quitclaim deed, tax lien, assignment of lien, foreclosure timeline, all of it perfectly legal, all of it carefully orchestrated, all of it leading to a single inevitable conclusion. Saturday is the gala, I said. Brandon's exposure, 6 days from now. And 83 days from today is September 7th, Nicole added. That's when the redemption period expires. when Amber realizes what she's inherited. I stood up and walked to the window. Down below, the harbor was full of sailboats cutting white wakes through dark water. People enjoying a beautiful Sunday morning, unaware that 23 floors above them, someone's entire world was being systematically dismantled. "Thank you, David," I said without turning around. "Your work has been flawless." "It's what you pay me for," he said, gathering his papers. "If you need anything else, I'll be available." He left. The door clicked shut. Nicole and I sat in silence for a moment. "Are you ready for Saturday?" she asked finally. I thought about the gala, about the gown hanging in my closet, about the moment when I'd walk onto that stage and watch my family's faces as they finally understood who I was. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." Nicole nodded. "Then the trap is set." The trap was set. The clock was ticking, and they had no idea the ground beneath them was already crumbling. I sat in the back corner of a Starbucks on State Street, 15 feet from Brandon Whitfield, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap I'd bought specifically for this moment. It was Thursday, 12:30 in the afternoon, 2 days before the gala. I'd been following Brandon's movements for the past week through Nicole's surveillance reports and my own observation. I knew he grabbed lunch at this Starbucks every Thursday around noon. I knew he sat at the same table near the window. I knew he ordered the same thing, turkey sandwich and black coffee. What I didn't know was whether today would be the day he finally put the pieces together. I'd ordered a latte I had no intention of drinking and positioned myself where I could see him clearly. But where I'd be, just another face in the lunchtime crowd. My laptop was open, a spreadsheet on screen that I wasn't reading. To anyone watching, I was just another professional on lunch break. But my entire focus was on the man 15 feet away. Brandon looked terrible. His tie was loosened. His hair, usually carefully styled, looked like he'd run his hands through it too many times. Dark circles under his eyes. And when he pulled out his phone, his hands were shaking slightly. Good. I watched as he set his sandwich down, untouched, and opened his laptop. Even from 15 feet away, I could see the tension in his shoulders. The way he kept glancing around like he was worried someone might be watching. Someone was. He typed something into his browser. I couldn't see his screen clearly, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly what he was searching for because Nicole had tracked his search history. He'd been Googling Sentinel Advisory Group obsessively for 3 days. Ever since the audit had been announced to Quantum's senior management. Ever since he'd realized someone was digging into his finances. Ever since his world had started falling apart. I took a sip of my latte and watched as Brandon leaned closer to his screen, reading something intently. His expression shifted from confusion to frustration to something like fear. He was on Sentinel's website. I knew because I'd designed it myself 4 years ago, and I'd made a very specific decision about what would and wouldn't be included. No photos of leadership, no CEO biography, no personal information, just a clean professional site with services testimonials and a contact form. The kind of website that said we're serious and discreet without giving away anything that could be used against us, without giving away anything that could help Brandon figure out who was destroying him. I watched as he pulled out his phone and dialed. He held it to his ear, and even though he was speaking quietly, the coffee shop was small enough that I could hear fragments. "Yeah, I'm looking at their website now," Brandon said. His voice was tight, strained. "No, there's nothing. No CEO name, no photos, nothing." A pause. "Crisis management and forensic accounting. That's what they specialize in." Another pause. "Of course I'm worried. They're doing a full audit of my department. Do you understand what that means?" His voice had risen slightly. A few people glanced over. Brandon noticed and lowered his voice, hunching over his phone. "I don't know who authorized it," he hissed. "Pearson, I guess, or the board, but they're coming for me. This Sentinel company, they're professional. They know what they're doing, and if they find—" He stopped abruptly, rubbed his face. "No," he said finally. "No, I covered my tracks. The LLCs are in Delaware and Nevada. The invoices look legitimate. They're not going to find anything." But his voice said otherwise. His voice said he knew exactly what they were going to find. What I had already found. $450,000 in fraudulent transactions, 18 months of systematic embezzlement, shell companies with his name buried in the incorporation documents, wire transfers to accounts he thought were untraceable. It had taken me 6 weeks to build the case, 6 weeks of late nights and forensic accounting. But I'd found every dollar, documented every transaction, built a case so airtight that even the best lawyer in Massachusetts couldn't get Brandon out of it. And he knew. On some level, he knew. "Look, I have to go," Brandon said. "I'll talk to you later." Yeah, I know." He hung up and set the phone down. For a long moment, he just sat there staring at his laptop screen. Then he started typing again. I watched as his fingers moved across the keyboard. He was searching for something else now. I saw his eyes narrow as he read whatever had come up. And then, and this was the moment my heart actually stopped, he typed something new. I couldn't see exactly what, but I saw his body language change, saw him sit up straighter, saw his eyes widen slightly. He'd found something. My pulse was racing. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my expression neutral, to take another casual sip like I wasn't watching a man potentially figure out that the woman sitting 15 feet away was about to destroy his entire life. Brandon's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. "Hello, yeah, this is Brandon Whitfield." A pause. "What?" "No, that's not possible. My accounts are fine. There must be some mistake." Then his face had gone pale. "Frozen." "What do you mean, frozen under whose authority?" Another pause. Longer, this time. "Federal investigation." "What federal?" He stopped, closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was something like resignation in his expression. No, I understand. Thank you for letting me know." He hung up slowly, set the phone down like it weighed 100 pounds. For a moment, he just sat there, completely still. Then he gathered his things, laptop, phone, the untouched sandwich, and stood up. I held my breath as he walked past my table toward the exit. He was so close I could have reached out and touched him. So close I could see the sweat beading at his temples. So close I could smell the fear radiating off him. But he didn't look at me, didn't even glance in my direction, because I was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, because I was just another anonymous professional in a crowded coffee shop, because Brandon Whitfield had spent 38 years not seeing people he considered beneath him, and now that blindness was going to cost him everything. The door closed behind him. I watched through the window as he walked down State Street, shoulders hunched, moving like a man walking toward his own execution. My phone buzzed, a text from Nicole. "Gala confirmed. Saturday, 7 p.m. Pearson will introduce you at 7:30. Everything is ready." I typed back perfect. I closed my laptop and finished my latte. Around me, the coffee shop continued its normal rhythm. People ordering drinks, people typing on laptops, people having conversations about weekend plans and kids' soccer games. None of them knew that 15 feet from where they were sitting, a man had just come within inches of discovering the truth. Within inches of realizing that the woman in the baseball cap was the CEO of the company about to expose him. Within inches of understanding that his sister-in-law, the one he'd dismissed and mocked for years, was the architect of his destruction. He'd been so close to the truth, but close wasn't enough. And by the time he figured it out, by the time he walked into that gala on Saturday night and saw me standing on that stage, it would already be too late. The gown was waiting for me in a private viewing room at Saks Fifth Avenue on Boylston Street. Oscar de la Renta, Spring 2025 collection. Champagne silk with hand-embroidered crystals that caught light like captured stars. A fitted bodice flowing into a dramatic floor-length skirt. Cap sleeves, a subtle train. The kind of dress that didn't just make an entrance, it commanded a room. $300,000. I'd bought it 3 months ago, the same week I'd started the forensic audit on Brandon. I'd known I'd need armor for what was coming, and this dress was the most powerful armor I could imagine. "It's stunning," Nicole said beside me, holding Julian's hand. Both stared at the gown like it was art. "Will you really wear that tomorrow?" Julian asked, voice hushed. "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow night at the gala." "You're going to look like a princess." I knelt down eye level with him. "Not a princess, baby. A queen." He smiled, the kind of smile that made everything I was about to do feel worth it. 2 hours later, I sat in a chair at Bella's salon on Newberry Street, while 3 people worked on transforming me from the woman who'd served drinks in a blue uniform last Saturday into Elise Bennett, CEO of Sentinel Advisory Group. My hairstylist Charlotte was creating soft waves that would frame my face and cascade down my back. Nothing too dramatic, just elegant, timeless, powerful. "You're nervous," Charlotte said, catching my eye in the mirror. "Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's known you for 4 years." She smiled. "Big event tomorrow." "The biggest," I said. At the station next to mine, Julian was getting his hair trimmed by a patient stylist. Not too short, not too long, just enough so it didn't get in his eyes when he was drawing. I watched him in the mirror, this small person who'd changed my life the moment I decided to adopt him 6 years ago. He'd been 2 years old in the foster system with big brown eyes and a smile that could break your heart. The caseworker had told me he was difficult, but I'd looked at him and seen myself. A child nobody wanted, and I'd known I would move heaven and earth to make sure he never felt that way again. "Mom." Julian caught my eye in the mirror. "Will I get to see you in the fancy dress tomorrow?" "You'll see me before I leave," I promised. After hair came makeup. After makeup came nails. And after nails, Nicole appeared with a midnight blue jewelry box I recognized immediately. Harry Winston. Boston. Nicole opened the box. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a diamond necklace that took my breath away. 30 carats, emerald-cut stones set in platinum. Each diamond perfectly matched perfectly clear, catching light and throwing it back in brilliant flashes. The kind of necklace that showed up in magazines. The kind that had its own insurance policy. The kind that cost more than most people made in 5 years. "Jesus," Charlotte breathed behind me. Nicole carefully lifted the necklace and fastened it around my neck. The weight of it was substantial, real. A reminder that this wasn't a costume. This was who I actually was. I looked at myself in the mirror. Hair in soft waves, makeup subtle but perfect, and the necklace catching the salon lights, making me look like I'd stepped out of a magazine. I looked nothing like the woman who'd worn a blue polyester uniform 5 days ago, and that was exactly the point. "Holy shit," Nicole said quietly. Then remembering Julian, wow, just wow. I stood and walked to the full-length mirror. Charlotte had laid out the gown so I could see how it would look tomorrow. I held it up against myself, the champagne silk against my skin, the crystals catching light, the necklace completing the look. Nicole was right. I looked like a queen. No, I looked like what I was. A self-made CEO worth $50 million. A woman who'd clawed her way out of poverty and built an empire. A mother who'd protected her son from a family that wanted to diminish him. A strategist who'd spent months planning the perfect revenge. "Mom." I turned. Julian stood there in his regular clothes jeans and a robot t-shirt looking at me with those big brown eyes. "You look different," he said. "Good different or bad different?" He thought about it. "Good different. Like you're glowing." I knelt down careful with the gown. "Tomorrow night is going to change everything, Julian. Do you understand that?" He nodded slowly. "Is it because of Grandpa's party and the torn pictures?" "It's because of a lot of things," I said. "But after tomorrow, people are going to see us differently. They're going to understand who we really are." Who we really are. "Important," I said simply. "We're important. And nobody gets to treat us like we're not ever again." He thought about that, then nodded. Okay. I kissed the top of his head. "Now let's get you fitted for a suit." By the time we left the salon 3 hours later, the sun was setting over Boston. The gown was being delivered to my penthouse that evening, along with matching shoes and a clutch. The necklace was going back to Harry Winston's vault until tomorrow, when a security guard would deliver it to my apartment at 5 p.m. Julian was exhausted, half asleep in the back seat as Michael drove us home, but he was wearing a brand new suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored with a crisp white shirt and a tie he'd chosen himself. Dark blue with tiny silver stars. Nicole sat in the front passenger seat, scrolling through her iPad, confirming last-minute details. Hair and makeup team arrives at 4, she said. Photographer at 6:30 for pre-event photos. Car service at 6:45. You'll arrive at the Langham at 7 sharp. And Pearson knows the plan. He knows exactly when to introduce you. 7:30 after the welcome speech. You'll walk out onto the stage, he'll announce Sentinel's partnership with Quantum, and then... She looked back and smiled. Then you show them everything. I looked out the window at the city passing by, at people walking home from work, heading to dinner, living their normal Friday evening lives. None of them knew that tomorrow night, in a ballroom at the Langham, a woman they'd never heard of was going to stand on a stage and destroy the people who'd spent 34 years making her feel small. Tomorrow night, the world would see who I really was, and my family would finally understand what they'd lost. The Bentley Flying Spur pulled up to the entrance of the Langham at exactly 7 p.m. Through the tinted windows, I could see the red carpet stretching from the curb to the hotel's grand entrance. Velvet ropes on either side. Photographers with cameras already raised. Hotel staff in pristine uniforms waiting to open doors. And beyond them, through the tall glass doors, I could see the warm, golden light of the grand ballroom and the silhouettes of Boston's elite already gathering inside. 500 people. CEOs. Board members, investors, the kind of people who decided the fate of companies with a handshake and a signature, the kind of people who were about to watch me destroy Brandon Whitfield. Ready? Michael asked from the driver's seat. He'd been my driver for 6 years, but tonight his voice held something different, respect, maybe even awe. I looked down at myself. The Oscar de la Renta gown champagne silk that caught the light and threw it back in 1,000 tiny sparkles. The 30-carat diamond necklace that sat against my collarbone like captured starlight. My hair in soft waves down my back. Makeup perfect. Shoes that cost more than a month's rent. I looked nothing like the woman who'd served drinks in a blue uniform 1 week ago. I looked like exactly who I was. Yes, I said. I'm ready. Beside me, Julian sat up straighter in his navy suit with the silver star tie. He'd been quiet for the entire drive, his small hand gripping mine tightly. "Are you scared, Mom?" he whispered. "No, baby," I said, and I meant it. I wasn't scared. I was powerful. "Are you—" He thought about it. A little. "That's okay. Fear means you're about to do something brave." I squeezed his hand. "And tonight we're going to be very brave." Michael got out and walked around to open my door. The moment he pulled it open, the world exploded in light. Camera flashes, dozens of them. Maybe more. Photographers leaning over the velvet ropes, calling out questions I couldn't hear over the sudden rush of sound. Hotel guests stopping on the sidewalk to stare, valets pausing mid-step, all of them watching me. I stepped out of the car slowly, deliberately, giving them time to see. The gown flowed around me like liquid silk. The diamonds caught the camera flashes and threw them back, multiplying the light. I could feel the weight of the necklace, the perfect fit of the dress, the height the heels gave me. I felt 10 feet tall. Michael moved to help Julian out, and my son emerged in his perfectly tailored suit, looking like a miniature gentleman. He immediately reached for my hand, and I took it, holding it firmly. "Who is she?" I heard someone ask. "I don't know. I've never seen her before." "That dress is Oscar de la Renta. Those diamonds are real. Look at the way they catch light. Is she with Quantum?" I smiled and began walking up the red carpet, not rushing, not hurrying, taking my time, letting them look. Letting them wonder. Letting them see that I belonged here, that I'd always belonged here, and they'd simply been too blind to notice. Julian walked beside me, his hand in mine, his steps matching mine. He was nervous. I could feel it in the way his palm was slightly damp, but he held his head high. My brave boy. A photographer called out, Miss, can we get a name?" I paused, turned slightly. Let them capture the three-quarter angle that would show off the dress, the necklace, the way my hair fell over one shoulder. Elise Bennett, I said clearly, CEO of Sentinel Advisory Group. I watched the photographers' faces change, watched comprehension dawn, watched them start taking pictures even faster. They knew that name. They'd heard about the audit, about the crisis management firm that had been hired to investigate quantum dynamics, about the CEO who'd spent months building a case against one of Quantum's senior directors. They just hadn't known who she was. Until now. I continued up the carpet toward the entrance. The hotel doorman, a distinguished older gentleman in a dark uniform, pulled open the massive glass door and nodded as I passed. "Good evening, Ms. Bennett." "Good evening." Inside, the Langham's lobby had been transformed. The usual elegant minimalism was now draped in white and gold, flowers everywhere, cascading arrangements of white roses and orchids, string quartet in the corner playing something classical, waiters circulating with champagne on silver trays, and people, so many people, in tuxedos and evening gowns clustered in groups talking and laughing and performing the social rituals of Boston's corporate elite. Several heads turned as I entered. I saw eyes widen, saw conversations pause, saw the ripple of attention spread through the room like a wave. They were seeing me, really seeing me. Not Elise, the struggling single mother. Not Elise, the disappointing daughter. Not Elise, the woman in the blue uniform serving drinks at her father's birthday party. Elise Bennett, CEO, $50 million, power. I scanned the room slowly, taking it all in. The grand ballroom was through the archway ahead. I could see the stage being prepared, the podium with Quantum Dynamics logo, the massive screens on either side that would display tonight's presentations. And then I saw them, standing near the bar on the far side of the lobby. Brandon in a tuxedo that fit him well but not perfectly. Amber in a red dress that was beautiful but not exceptional. Both of them holding drinks. Both of them talking to an older couple I didn't recognize. Both of them completely unaware that I was standing 30 feet away. I watched as Amber laughed at something the woman said. Watched as Brandon checked his phone with a worried expression. Watched as they performed their roles, the successful executive and his beautiful wife living their best lives, pretending everything was fine. They hadn't seen me yet, hadn't looked my direction. Hadn't noticed the woman in the champagne gown standing at the entrance with her son's hand in hers and 30 carats of diamonds around her neck. In about 30 minutes, William Pearson would take that stage. He would welcome everyone to Quantum Dynamics' annual gala. He would talk about the company's success and future vision. And then he would introduce me. And everything would change. Julian tugged on my hand. "Mom, are those?" "Yes," I said quietly. "That's them. Do they know you're here?" I looked down at my son and smiled. "Not yet, baby, but they will." I took a champagne flute from a passing waiter's tray even though I had no intention of drinking it. It was a prop, something to hold, something to make me look casual and comfortable and like I belonged exactly where I was. And then I started walking toward the ballroom entrance, slowly, deliberately, giving Amber and Brandon every opportunity to look up, to see me, to recognize me, but they didn't. They were too busy talking, too busy pretending, too busy performing their own roles to notice that the woman they'd dismissed and humiliated for 34 years was standing in the same room wearing more money than they'd make in 5 years. I could see them from across the room, Amber's jaw about to drop, Brandon's face about to go pale, and I smiled because the show was about to begin. For 30 minutes, I stood in the grand ballroom with Julian beside me, champagne glass in hand, watching the room fill with Boston's corporate elite. I saw CEOs I recognized from Forbes covers, board members whose decisions moved markets, investors who controlled billions, and scattered among them my family, Brandon adjusting his tie nervously, Amber laughing too loudly at someone's joke, my parents looking uncomfortable in formal wear they'd probably rented. None of them had looked my direction yet. None of them had recognized the woman in the champagne gown standing 30 feet away. And then the lights dimmed. Conversation quieted. People turned toward the stage at the front of the ballroom. The massive screens on either side lit up with Quantum Dynamics logo, a stylized cue with circuit board patterns flowing through it. And William Pearson walked onto the stage. He was 62 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of commanding presence that came from 30 years of running a multi-billion-dollar tech company. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo and moved with the confidence of someone who'd given 1,000 speeches and knew exactly how to own a room. I'd spoken to him dozens of times over the past 4 months, conference calls about the audit strategy sessions, about tonight's announcement, carefully coordinated plans that had led to this exact moment. But I'd never met him in person, until now. He reached the podium and smiled out at the audience. 500 people went completely silent. "Good evening," Pearson said, his voice amplified by the microphone filling every corner of the ballroom. "Welcome to Quantum Dynamics' annual gala. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here tonight." Polite applause. Pearson waited for it to fade before continuing. "Tonight is a celebration, as it always is. We're here to recognize another year of innovation, growth, and success." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "But tonight is also about transparency, about integrity, about the hard choices we make when we discover that not everyone in our organization shares our values." I felt the energy in the room shift, people leaning forward slightly, curious, concerned. Across the ballroom, I saw Brandon go very still. 4 months ago, Pearson continued, our board became aware of irregularities in our financial reporting, transactions that didn't quite add up, invoices that didn't quite make sense. And we made a decision that I'm very proud of. We decided to find the truth no matter what it cost us. Someone coughed. Otherwise, the room was silent. We brought in the best crisis management firm in Boston, maybe in the country, a company that specializes in forensic accounting and corporate investigations. A company with a reputation for being absolutely thorough, absolutely professional, and absolutely uncompromising when it comes to finding the truth. My heart was pounding now, not from fear, from anticipation. "That company is Sentinel Advisory Group," Pearson said. I watched Brandon's face go pale, watched Amber's hand find his arm, gripping it tightly. Watched my father lean toward my mother and whisper something I couldn't hear. They knew that name. They'd heard Brandon talking about it for weeks. The company that was investigating him. The company that was building a case against him. The company he'd tried desperately to find information about. And now they were about to learn who ran it. Over the past 4 months, Pearson continued, Sentinel has conducted an exhaustive audit of our financial systems. They've reviewed hundreds of thousands of transactions. They've interviewed dozens of employees. They've built a case so thorough, so detailed, that it will serve as a model for corporate accountability for years to come. He paused, letting that sink in. Tonight, I'm honored to announce Quantum Dynamics' strategic partnership with Sentinel Advisory Group. And I'm even more honored to introduce you to the woman who's been leading this investigation, the CEO, who's spent months uncovering the truth, the person who's about to show us exactly what integrity looks like. This was it. This was the moment. Before the truth is revealed, if you're still here, please leave a comment to let me know you're still with me. If it were you, would you choose to silently walk away or step onto the stage to make those who disrespect you pay the price? And please note the story contains fictional elements to increase the drama. If you feel uncomfortable, you can stop here. Ladies and gentlemen, William Pearson said, please join me in welcoming Elise Bennett, CEO of Sentinel Advisory Group. The ballroom exploded in applause, but I wasn't listening to the applause. I was watching Brandon's face as comprehension finally dawned, as he realized that the CEO of the company investigating him, the person who'd built the case that was about to destroy his life, was his sister-in-law, the woman he'd dismissed, the woman he'd mocked, the woman he'd watched serve drinks in a blue uniform 1 week ago. I was watching Amber's expression shift from confusion to recognition to horror. Watching her mouth form my name silently, watching her turn to look at Brandon, then back at me, then back at Brandon, like she couldn't quite process what she was seeing. I was watching my father's face, Raymond Bennett, who'd spent 65 years believing his younger daughter would never amount to anything, as he realized the woman walking toward that stage in a $300,000 gown was me. I handed my champagne glass to a passing waiter. I squeezed Julian's hand one more time. "Wait here with Nicole," I whispered. "I'll be right back." And then I started walking toward the stage. The crowd parted for me automatically. People I didn't know stepping aside, still applauding, watching me pass. I could feel their eyes on me, could feel the weight of the moment, could feel the diamonds around my neck catching the light with every step. I climbed the 3 stairs to the stage. Pearson was waiting at the top, smiling, extending his hand. I shook it, and the applause grew louder. Behind us, the screens that had shown Quantum's logo now displayed the Sentinel Advisory Group emblem. Clean, professional, powerful. Pearson leaned close, still shaking my hand, and said quietly, "They're all yours." "Thank you," I said. He stepped aside, yielding the podium to me. I turned to face the audience. 500 people, all of them looking at me. Most of them applauding, some standing now, a standing ovation. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at table 17 near the back, where Brandon sat, frozen, his face white as paper, where Amber gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white, where my parents sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they were seeing. Brandon's face had turned white. Amber gripped the table, and I took the microphone. I stood at the podium, the microphone in my hand, and looked out at 500 faces waiting for me to speak. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just let them see me. Let them see the woman in the $300,000 gown and 30 carats of diamonds. Let them see the CEO they'd just applauded. Let them wonder what I was about to say. And then I spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Pearson," I said. My voice was steady, clear, amplified by the microphone and the ballroom's perfect acoustics. "And thank you all for being here tonight." I pressed a button on the small remote in my hand. The screens on either side of the stage changed. Sentinel's logo disappeared, replaced by a single slide with a single number. $450,000, $450,000. I said, letting the number hang in the air. That's the amount of money stolen from Quantum Dynamics over the past 18 months through systematic embezzlement, fraudulent invoicing, and wire fraud. The room went absolutely silent. I let the silence sit for a moment before continuing. Over the past 4 months, my team at Sentinel Advisory Group has conducted a comprehensive forensic audit of Quantum's financial systems. We've reviewed over 200,000 transactions. We've interviewed 43 employees. We've traced money through multiple accounts, multiple states, and multiple shell corporations. I pressed the remote again. The slide changed to show a flowchart, a web of transactions flowing from Quantum Dynamics to 3 separate LLCs, then from those LLCs to personal bank accounts. The embezzlement scheme was sophisticated but not perfect, I said. It relied on 3 shell companies: Apex Consulting LLC registered in Delaware, Summit Solutions LLC registered in Nevada, and Vanguard Services LLC also registered in Nevada. I watched Brandon from the corner of my eye. He was sitting very still, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of the table. These companies existed only on paper, I continued. They had no employees, no office space, no legitimate business operations. They existed for one purpose only: to receive fraudulent payments from Quantum Dynamics and transfer that money to personal accounts. Another click, another slide. This one showed actual invoices, line items for consulting services and strategic advisory fees and technology implementation support. Over 18 months, Quantum paid these 3 companies a combined total of $450,000 for services that were never rendered. My voice was clinical now, methodical. Each word, a nail in a coffin. The payments were approved through standard procurement channels. They were processed by Quantum's accounting department. They appeared legitimate. I paused, but they weren't. Click. The next slide showed bank statements, wire transfer receipts, account numbers with certain digits redacted for privacy, but enough visible to make the point. Every dollar that Quantum paid to these shell companies was immediately transferred to personal bank accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts, investment accounts. I looked directly at the audience, now making eye contact with board members I recognized from the photos Nicole had shown me. The money was used to pay for personal expenses, luxury car leases, private school tuition, country club memberships, vacations. Someone in the audience gasped. I heard whispers starting, saw people leaning toward each other, murmuring. I clicked to the next slide. This one showed documents, incorporation papers for the LLCs, wire transfer authorizations, vendor approval forms, and on every single document in the signature box, the same name appeared, Brandon Whitfield. The person who created these shell companies, I said quietly, was Brandon Whitfield, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Quantum Dynamics. The person who submitted the fraudulent invoices was Brandon Whitfield. The person who approved the payments was Brandon Whitfield. And the person who received the money. I clicked one more time, and the final slide appeared showing a bank account statement with Brandon's name clearly visible at the top. I was Brandon Whitfield. The whispers grew louder. I saw heads turning toward table 17, saw people craning their necks to see Brandon's reaction. I didn't need to look. I could feel his panic from across the room. The evidence is comprehensive, I said. We have 18 months of bank statements, 3 years of tax returns showing unreported income, email communications discussing the scheme, text messages coordinating transfers, digital footprints that cannot be erased or explained away. I set the remote down on the podium and gripped the edges, leaning forward slightly. This wasn't a mistake, I said. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, systematic theft. It was fraud on a massive scale. And it was perpetrated by someone Quantum Dynamics trusted, someone who held a position of significant responsibility, someone who betrayed that trust for personal gain. The ballroom was so quiet now that I could hear my own breathing through the microphone. I looked out at the audience, at the board members who were staring at the screens with expressions of shock and anger, at the investors who were probably already calculating how this would affect stock prices, at the employees who were realizing their colleague, their director, had stolen nearly $500,000 from the company they all worked for. And then I looked at table 17, at Brandon, whose face had gone from pale to gray, whose hands were shaking so badly he'd had to put them in his lap, whose eyes were fixed on the screens like he couldn't look away from the evidence of his own crimes, at Amber, who was staring at her husband with an expression I couldn't quite read, horror maybe, or disbelief, or the dawning realization that the life she'd thought they were living was built entirely on stolen money, at my parents who sat frozen, unable to process what they were seeing, unable to reconcile the son-in-law they'd praised and the criminal I was exposing him as. In summary, I said, turning back to the audience, Brandon Whitfield stole $450,000 from Quantum Dynamics through fraudulent means. The evidence is irrefutable, and this is a lie. Brandon's voice cut through the ballroom like a knife. I watched as he stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. His face was red now, anger replacing shock. This is a lie, he shouted again, pointing at the stage. At me. This is you can't. There's been a mistake. Those numbers are wrong. The audit is flawed. I never. Mr. Whitfield, my voice was calm, steady, in complete control. The numbers are not wrong. The audit is not flawed. And you did steal $450,000 from this company. No. He was breathing hard now, looking around the room like he was searching for support, finding none. No, this is someone set me up. Someone falsified those records. I didn't. Your signature is on every document, I said quietly. Your name is on every account. Your fingerprints are on every transaction. Then they were forged. This whole thing is, he was unraveling now, desperation replacing anger. You're lying, you're Mr. Whitfield, I said, and something in my tone made him stop. made the entire ballroom go silent again. The numbers don't lie. I looked directly at him across the space between us, and neither do I. I clicked the remote one more time. A new slide appeared, a detailed breakdown of exactly how Brandon had spent the stolen money. "Let me be more specific," I said, my voice cutting through the whispers that had filled the ballroom. $450,000. Where did it go? The slide showed a list. Clean. Simple. Damning. $36,000 for a Mercedes GLE 450 lease, 3-year contract at $1,000 per month, paid for with wire transfers from Summit Solutions, LLC. I let that sink in before continuing. $60,000 for private school tuition, 2 children, Brookline Academy, $30,000 per child per year for 2 years, paid for with checks from Apex Consulting. Brandon was on his feet now, but he wasn't shouting anymore. He was standing there frozen as I systematically dismantled the life he'd built with stolen money. $45,000 for country club membership and fees, the Brookline Country Club. Initiation fee, annual dues, golf lessons, dining charges, paid for through Vanguard Services. I paused, looking directly at him. $80,000 for vacations, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, a week in Aruba, 5-star hotels, first-class flights, all of it paid for with money that didn't belong to you. That's, Brandon's voice cracked. Those were legitimate business expenses. The car was for work. The club was for networking. I was building relationships that benefited Quantum. Mr. Whitfield. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. The Mercedes was registered in your personal name, not the company's. The country club membership was in your wife's name. The vacations were taken during personal time, not business trips. These were not business expenses. This was theft. I clicked again. The next slide showed more items. $22,000 for jewelry, designer handbags, luxury watches, $53,000 for home renovations, a new kitchen, a finished basement, landscaping. I looked out at the audience, at the board members whose faces had gone from shock to furious, and $154,000 transferred directly to personal investment accounts, retirement funds, stock portfolios, money that Mr. Whitfield was essentially paying himself as a bonus he hadn't earned and wasn't entitled to. The math was perfect. The breakdown was complete. Every dollar accounted for. Every expense documented. Every lie exposed. "This wasn't a mistake," I said quietly. "This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was systematic theft for personal enrichment. And it went on for 18 months because Mr. Whitfield believed he was too smart to get caught." Brandon looked around the room desperately. There were family emergencies. My father-in-law had surgery, medical expenses. I was trying to help my family. "Your father-in-law's surgery," I said, and I felt something cold settle in my chest, "was paid for by an anonymous donor, not by you. The hospital has records. The payment came from a private account that had nothing to do with you or these shell companies." That was the moment I saw true panic flash across Brandon's face, because I'd just revealed something he didn't know I knew, something that proved I'd investigated every aspect of his life, every excuse he might try to use. And he realized in that moment that there was no way out. I think I speak for the entire board. William Pearson said, stepping forward to stand beside me at the podium, when I say that this evidence is both comprehensive and devastating. He turned to look at a group of men and women sitting at table 3, the board of directors. I'd been introduced to them briefly before the gala professional handshakes and carefully neutral expressions. Now those expressions were anything but neutral. "The board needs a moment to confer," Pearson said, "but I think we all know what the outcome will be." The 7 board members stood and moved to the side of the ballroom, forming a tight circle. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. I watched Brandon watch them, his face going from desperate to resigned to something that looked almost like defeat. When they returned to their seats, the board chair, a woman named Margaret who'd been with Quantum for 20 years, nodded to Pearson. He turned back to the microphone. "Brandon Whitfield." Pearson said, his voice formal now, official, effective. Immediately your employment with Quantum Dynamics is terminated. You are relieved of all duties, stripped of all access to company systems and facilities, and will be escorted from the premises. Your final paycheck minus restitution for stolen funds will be processed according to Massachusetts labor law. The ballroom was dead silent. Furthermore, Pearson continued, Quantum Dynamics will be referring this matter to federal prosecutors for criminal investigation. The evidence Ms. Bennett has compiled will be turned over to the appropriate authorities, and we will be pursuing civil action to recover all stolen funds plus damages. Brandon just stood there, not arguing anymore, not defending himself, just standing there as his entire life collapsed around him. Security, Pearson said, gesturing to the back of the room. Please escort Mr. Whitfield out. 2 men in dark suits appeared from the side entrance, Langham security professional and efficient. They moved toward table 17, where Brandon still stood, his hand gripping the back of his chair like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Amber was crying now, quietly, mascara running down her face. My parents sat frozen on either side of her, unable to process what they were witnessing. The security guards reached Brandon. One of them spoke quietly, words I couldn't hear but could imagine. Sir, we need you to come with us. Please don't make a scene. Brandon nodded numbly. He let go of the chair, straightened his tie with shaking hands, and then he started walking toward the exit, flanked by security, while 500 people watched in complete silence. And then I saw them, standing just inside the ballroom entrance, partially obscured by the crowd. 2 men in dark uniforms, not hotel security, not private security, Boston police, badges visible on their chests, radios on their belts, handcuffs hanging from their utility belts. They were waiting. And suddenly I understood that this wasn't just about termination. This wasn't just about civil restitution. This was about criminal charges, about federal prosecution, about the fact that Pearson and the board hadn't just fired Brandon, they'd coordinated with law enforcement to have him arrested. Tonight, right now, in front of everyone. The security guards were walking Brandon toward those officers, and Brandon, lost in his own despair, hadn't seen them yet. But I had, and behind them, I saw 2 police officers entering the ballroom. The 2 Boston police officers stepped into the grand ballroom with the kind of deliberate calm that only comes from years of walking into rooms full of people who thought they were untouchable. 500 guests turned. The murmur died. The chandeliers above us cast hard shadows across the polished marble floor, and in that moment, the only sound was the measured click of regulation shoes against stone. Brandon stood frozen near his table, his face still flushed from his outburst during the termination vote. Amber gripped his arm. Raymond had half risen from his seat, his hand extended as if he could somehow stop what was already in motion. But gravity doesn't negotiate. The taller officer, mid-40s, graying at the temples, badge number 4127, approached Brandon directly. His partner, younger but no less professional, positioned himself to Brandon's left. Classic formation. No theatrics, just procedure. Brandon Whitfield, the senior officer said. Brandon's voice cracked. Yes, Mr. Whitfield, you are under arrest for embezzlement and wire fraud under Massachusetts general laws, Chapter 266, Section 30, and Federal Statute 18 U.S.C., Section 1343. The room inhaled. You have the right to remain silent. The officer continued, his tone flat and practiced. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you? Brandon opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. There's been a mistake. Do you understand these rights, Mr. Whitfield? Yes, but... The officer nodded to his partner. The younger officer stepped forward with the handcuffs. That was when Amber screamed. There's been some mistake. Her voice was shrill, frantic, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. She lunged toward the officers, her Marchesa gown powder blue, $12,000 tangling around her heels. "You can't do this." "He didn't do anything." The junior officer held up a hand, firm but not aggressive. "Ma'am, please step back." "He's innocent," Amber shrieked. "This is a setup." "That woman." She jabbed a finger toward the stage toward me. "She's lying. She's always been jealous of us." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I simply watched. Because this was what justice looked like when it finally arrived. Raymond lurched forward, his face red, his breath coming in short bursts. He'd had a triple bypass 4 months ago. The surgery I'd paid for. The surgery he didn't know I'd funded. Officer Raymond said, his voice booming with the kind of authority he'd spent a lifetime cultivating in boardrooms and country clubs. "I'm sure we can work this out. There's been a misunderstanding. My son-in-law is a respected executive at Quantum Dynamics." "Sir," the senior officer said, his tone hardening. "Step back, now." Raymond froze. For the first time in my life, I saw my father rendered speechless. The metallic click of the handcuffs closing around Brandon's wrists echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Brandon's knees buckled. The officers steadied him, professional and efficient. His face had gone from flushed to ashen, his eyes wide and glassy with shock. "This isn't real," he whispered. "This can't be happening." But it was. The senior officer took Brandon by the elbow and began guiding him toward the exit. The crowd parted, CEOs in Tom Ford tuxedos, board members in Chanel gowns, investors who'd flown in from New York and San Francisco, all of them stepping back as if embezzlement were contagious. Amber stumbled after them, sobbing. Brandon, don't say anything. We'll call a lawyer. We'll fix this." But there was nothing to fix. The cameras, society photographers, business journalists, a few bloggers who'd somehow secured press passes, erupted in a frenzy of flashes. The light was blinding, stroboscopic, turning Brandon's perp walk into a grotesque red carpet moment. Click, click, click. Every angle, every expression. Every humiliating second captured in high resolution for tomorrow's headlines. Brandon stumbled. The officer steadied him again, patient and unyielding. Diane had collapsed into her chair, one hand clutching her pearl necklace, 3 strands Mickey Moto, a 50th anniversary gift from Raymond. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of public shame had physically compressed her. Raymond stood rooted in place, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was staring at me now, his eyes full of something I'd never seen before. Not anger, not confusion, recognition. He was finally seeing me, not as the invisible daughter, not as the afterthought, but as the woman who had just dismantled his perfect family in front of 500 witnesses. And he knew God, he knew that I had done it on purpose. William Pearson stepped up beside me on the stage, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Bennett," he said quietly, "the board has asked me to formally thank Sentinel Advisory Group for your thorough work." I nodded. "It's what we do." He glanced toward the exit where Brandon was being led through the double doors and into the hotel corridor beyond. "I imagine this isn't easy, given your family connection." I met his eyes. "Justice is never easy, Mr. Pearson, but it's necessary." He held my gaze for a long moment, then inclined his head. Indeed. Below us, Amber had collapsed into her chair, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Cody and Cameron, the twins, 10 years old, dressed in matching navy suits, sat frozen on either side of her, their faces pale and confused. Raymond finally moved, crossing to Diane and placing a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, and just like that, the fractures became visible. The ballroom had erupted into whispers, low urgent, spreading like wildfire. I caught fragments as I stood there watching it all unfold. 450,000 shell companies in Delaware. Now, his own wife didn't Sentinel Advisory Group. They're the ones who, that's his sister-in-law on stage. That's Elise Bennett. I let the words wash over me. Let them see. Let them understand. Because this was the point. Not just to expose Brandon. Not just to reclaim my dignity. but to show my family and everyone who had ever underestimated me exactly what I was capable of. The ballroom doors swung shut behind the officers and their handcuffed prisoner. The flashes stopped. The crowd began to settle, though the hum of shocked conversation continued. I stepped back from the microphone and turned to William. "Thank you for the platform, Mr. Pearson." He nodded. "The pleasure was ours, Mrs. Bennett." I descended the stage steps, Nicole materializing at my side with her tablet and her ever-present efficiency. "Phase 3, she murmured. I glanced toward my family's table. Amber still sobbing, Raymond and Diane shell-shocked and silent, and I smiled because I wasn't done yet. There was still one more bomb about to drop. They found a private alcove off the grand ballroom, one of those small anterooms the Langham kept for VIP guests who needed a moment away from the crowd. Amber had practically fled there after Brandon was taken away, Diane and Raymond trailing behind her like shell-shocked bodyguards. I gave them 5 minutes, then I followed. The room was small, elegant, decorated in cream and gold. A single chandelier cast soft light over a velvet settee, where Amber had collapsed her Marchesa gown, pooling around her like a deflated parachute. Diane stood beside her, one hand on Amber's shoulder. Raymond paced near the window, his face still flushed, his breathing labored. They looked up when I entered. "Get out," Amber hissed. I closed the door behind me. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to say to you," Diane snapped. Her voice was sharp, brittle. "You've done enough damage for one night." I didn't respond. I simply stood there, my hands folded in front of me, the 30-carat necklace catching the light. That was when Amber's phone buzzed. She glanced at it reflexively, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the screen. Then she froze. "What?" she whispered. Another buzz, another notification. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the phone. I watched her eyes scan the message once, twice, 3 times. Then she looked up at me, her face draining of color. "My account," she said slowly. It's frozen." Raymond stopped pacing. "What? The bank?" Amber's voice was rising panic, threading through each word. "They froze my checking account, and the savings, and oh my God, the business account too. All of them." She turned to me, her eyes wild. "What did you do?" I kept my voice calm, clinical. "Brandon's accounts are now evidence in a federal embezzlement investigation. Any assets connected to the alleged fraud are subject to seizure pending trial. But those are my accounts." Amber shrieked. "You're listed as a joint holder on 3 of them," I said. "The Mercedes lease is in your name, the country club membership, Stop." Raymond's voice cut through the room like a blade. He crossed to me in 3 strides, his bulk imposing his face inches from mine. "This is your doing. You orchestrated this." I met his eyes without flinching. "I reported a crime. The rest is federal procedure. You're destroying your own family. Am I tilted my head slightly. "Or am I finally holding them accountable?" Diane stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Elise, please. Think about Julian. Think about Cody and Cameron. Those boys were allowed to tear my son's sketchbook to pieces while you stood there and called him too sensitive," I said quietly. "So forgive me if I'm not particularly concerned about their comfort right now." The room went silent. Amber stood abruptly, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. Fine. You want to play this game, I still have the house. I still have the equity Dad and Mom signed over to me. You can't touch that." I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "About the house?" I said. Raymond's eyes narrowed. "What about it?" I reached into my clutch, a small Judith Lieber black crystal $8,000, and pulled out a folded document. I set it on the console table beside the settee. "The property at 285 Chestnut Street, Brookline, Massachusetts," I said, "transferred via quitclaim deed from Raymond and Diane Bennett to Amber Whitfield on June 10th of this year. Executed at 9:47 a.m., recorded with the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds at 10:15 a.m. Amber stared at the paper. So as I continued, What Brandon didn't mention when he convinced you to sign that deed for tax purposes it was that the property carried an outstanding tax lien of $180,000? The color drained from Diane's face. The city of Brookline filed that lien on March 15th of last year, I said. When you transferred ownership to Amber, you also transferred liability for that debt. Raymond's voice was hoarse. We were going to pay it off. We had a plan. You had a plan, I corrected. But on May 20th, the city sold that lien, which is perfectly legal under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 60. A private investor purchased the debt for $195,000, a $15,000 premium over the lien amount. I paused. That investor was me. Amber's phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the marble floor. What? She whispered. I own the tax lien on your house, I said, which means I am now the primary lien holder. And under Massachusetts law, if that debt isn't paid in full within 90 days of the lien sale, I have the legal right to foreclose. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. No, the lien was sold on May 20th, I continued, which gives you until September 7th to pay the full $180,000. That's 83 days from today. I glanced at Amber, whose face had gone completely white. Of course, I added, given that your bank accounts are currently frozen and your husband is facing federal fraud charges and you have no income of your own, I imagine coming up with that kind of cash might be difficult. You set me up, Amber breathed. You set me up. No, I said softly. You signed the deed. Brandon pushed you into it. Your parents handed you a house with a massive debt attached. I simply purchased that debt, legally, transparently. I picked up the document and held it out to her. I'm not the villain here, Amber. I'm just the debt collector. Her hand trembled as she took the paper. She stared at it, her eyes scanning the numbers, the dates, the legal jargon that sealed her fate. Then she crumpled. Not physically, but I watched the moment her entire world collapsed inward. Her shoulders sagged, her breathing turned shallow. The tears came again, but this time they were silent. Raymond sank into the chair near the window, his hand pressed to his chest. He looked old suddenly, frail, and Diane was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not shock, understanding. You're not our daughter anymore, she whispered. I met her eyes. No, I said, I'm not. I turned and walked to the door. My hand was on the handle when I paused, glancing back over my shoulder. 83 days, I said quietly. The clock is ticking. Then I stepped out into the hallway and closed the door behind me. Behind me, I heard Amber's sobs, Raymond's labored breathing, Diane's silence, and I felt nothing. Because this was what justice looked like when you stopped asking for permission. I wasn't their servant. I was their reckoning. The grand ballroom had emptied. 500 guests reduced to a handful journalists comparing notes board members lingering at the bar, investors still processing what they'd witnessed. I stood near the exit with Julian and Nicole. Across the marble foyer, I saw them. Amber, her Marchesa gown wrinkled and stained with tears. Raymond moving slowly, one hand pressed to his chest. Diane clutching her Hermes bag like a shield. They were leaving, slipping away into the night. Wait! I called out. They froze. I crossed the polished floor, my heels echoing in the sudden quiet. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small white envelope. I have something for you, I said. Amber stared at the envelope like it might explode. Her hands trembled as she took it. Open it, I said. She tore the seal. Inside was a single plastic card, green and white, the sweet green logo printed across the front, a $25 gift card. I don't understand, Amber whispered. It's for salad, I said calmly. Caesar salad specifically, since you told Julian at Moo that salads fill you up faster than beef. Her face went white. That night, I continued, you ordered a $16 Caesar salad for my 8-year-old son, while you and Brandon ate $185 Wagyu steaks and $85 lobster tails. You smiled at Julian and told him salad would fill him up faster than meat. My voice remained even, clinical. You made a child feel worthless at a table where adults feasted. You taught him his value with a bowl of lettuce and condescension. I pressed the card firmly into her palm. So this is for you, $25. Enough for a salad or two, maybe a side. Certainly not enough for a family meal. But then again, I smiled. Salads fill you up faster, don't they? The card slipped from Amber's fingers and clattered onto the marble. I bent down, picked it up, and placed it back in her hand. Keep it, I said quietly. Consider it a souvenir, a reminder. Amber turned away, shoulders shaking with sobs, and I felt absolutely nothing. I turned toward my parents. Raymond and Diane stood together, two people who'd built a life on appearances, now watching their perfect world crumble. Elise. Raymond said, his voice strained. We can explain. Explain what? I cut him off. 36 years of being the second choice. 36 years of being invisible in my own family. That's not true, Diane protested. We've always loved you, loved me. I pulled out my phone and held up the screen. Christmas 2023, Thanksgiving 2024, Easter this year. Count how many photos I'm in, Mother. Raymond glanced at the images. His jaw tightened. 3, I said. 3 photos out of 274, and in 2 of them I'm cropped at the edge, barely visible. Silence filled the space between us. You invited me to Dad's birthday party and made me wear a server's uniform, I continued. You watched Cody and Cameron destroy Julian's sketchbook and told my son he was too sensitive. You sat through dinner after dinner while Brandon humiliated us and said nothing. We were trying to keep the peace, Diane said weakly. Amber needed, Amber deserved, Amber. My voice rose slightly. What about what I needed? What about what Julian deserved? Neither of them answered. I took a breath. When I spoke again, my voice was softer, quieter. 4 months ago, you had a heart attack, I said to Raymond. His expression shifted. Emergency bypass surgery at Mass General. Dr. Reeves operated. 5 hours on the table. The bill was $45,000. Diane's face paled. How do you know insurance covered $30,000? I continued. That left $15,000 out of pocket. You didn't have it. The hospital called, sent letters, threatened to send the balance to collections. I kept my eyes locked on Raymond. Someone paid it, anonymously. $15,000. A wire transfer with a note for Raymond Bennett, with hope. Raymond's breath caught. That was... you, he whispered. Yes. The single word landed like a stone in still water. I paid for your surgery, I said quietly. I received a call from a billing specialist telling me your account was delinquent, that you might lose coverage for post-op care, for cardiac rehab. My voice cracked. So I paid it. $15,000 from my personal account. No questions asked, no acknowledgement expected. I just paid it. Diane's hand flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Because despite everything, I said, you're still my father, and I couldn't let you die. Raymond reached toward me, his eyes brimming. Elise, I didn't know. You didn't know because I didn't tell you, I said. Because I knew if you found out it was me, you'd find some way to dismiss it, to make it about Amber, to minimize what I did. I stepped back. I saved your life. I gave you more time, more birthdays, more holidays, and you spent that time making me serve drinks in a uniform while Amber played queen of the family. Please, Raymond's voice broke. We made mistakes. I'm your daughter. I said, tears spilling down my cheeks now. I've been your daughter for 34 years. I built a $50 million company from nothing. I've been a devoted mother to Julian. I've been brilliant and successful and kind. My voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And it was never enough, because I wasn't Amber. Diane sobbed openly now. We didn't mean to... Yes, I said gently. You did. I turned to Julian, who stood silently beside Nicole. His eyes were bright, his small hand reaching for mine. I took it. "Come on, sweetheart," I said. "We're going home." I looked at my parents one final time. Raymond, tears streaming down his face, Diane broken and hollow, and Amber standing alone near the exit clutching a $25 gift card like evidence of her own cruelty. "Goodbye," I said. Not "see you later," not "talk soon," just goodbye. I walked toward the doors. Nicole fell into step beside me. Julian squeezed my hand. Behind me, Raymond called my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I was walking away from people who didn't deserve me and toward a future where I didn't need their approval to know my worth. The Bentley waited outside. Michael opened the door. Julian climbed in first, then Nicole, then me. As we pulled away from the Langham, I glanced out the window one last time. Amber stood on the steps, gift card in hand. Raymond and Diane stood behind her, shadows of who they used to be, and I felt nothing but peace. The reckoning was complete, the debt was paid, and I was free. I was halfway to the Bentley when I heard his voice. "Elise." Not loud, not commanding, just my name spoken with a weight that made me stop. I turned. William Pearson stood in the Langham's doorway, backlit by the lobby's golden glow. His tuxedo was still immaculate, but there was something different in his expression, something vulnerable. "I need to speak with you," he said. "Privately." I glanced at Nicole, who stood beside the car with Julian. She nodded. 5 minutes, I said. "It may take longer." I hesitated, then walked back toward him. He led me through a side corridor away from the ballroom. We climbed a narrow staircase to the 3rd floor where executive offices were housed, small, elegant rooms, the Langham reserved for VIP meetings. William opened a heavy oak door and gestured inside. The room was understated. Mahogany desk, 2 leather chairs, a window overlooking Boston Common city lights glittering in the distance. "Please," William said. "Sit." I sat. He closed the door and took the chair opposite mine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then William folded his hands and looked at me directly. 34 years ago, he said quietly, "I knew your mother." I blinked. "What?" "Diane. Before she married Raymond. Before you were born. She worked at Quantum Dynamics as a secretary in the finance department." My breath caught. I was 32, vice president of operations, married but unhappily. He paused. "We had an affair." The words hung in the air. "It lasted 6 months," William continued. "We were careful, discreet. But then she told me she was pregnant." My heart stopped. She said she couldn't keep working at Quantum, that people would talk, that it would ruin both of us. So she left. She went back to Raymond, her high school boyfriend, and married him 2 weeks later. He looked down. 3 months after that, Raymond announced his wife had given birth to a daughter. "No," I whispered. "Raymond is my father." "Raymond raised you," William said gently, "but I don't believe he's your biological father." I stood abruptly. "You can't just—" "I had a DNA test done," William said. I froze. 6 months ago, he continued, "I hired a private investigator. You'd built Sentinel into one of the most respected firms in Boston. When I saw your photo in the Globe, when I saw your face, I saw Diane. I saw myself." He pulled a folded document from his jacket and set it on the desk. "The investigator obtained a sample. Legally. A coffee cup you discarded at a conference in March. I had it tested against my DNA." I stared at the paper. The results came back with a 99.7% probability of paternity. My legs gave out. I sank into the chair. "You are my daughter, Lise." The room spun. I thought of Raymond. 34 years of being invisible, of being second choice, and suddenly it made sense. "He knew," I whispered. William frowned. "What?" "Raymond," I said, my voice shaking. "He knew. That's why Amber was always the favorite. He raised another man's child and resented me for it, every single day." And I pressed my hands to my face. "That's why I was never good enough." "If he failed you, that's on him," William said firmly. "Not you." I looked up. Why tell me now? William exhaled. Because I've watched you from afar for 6 months. I've seen the empire you've built, the way you protect your son, the way you carried yourself tonight with grace and strength and justice. He stood and walked to the window. When I learned you were my daughter, I wanted to meet you, but I didn't know how. So I engineered a reason. I stared. Protocol Obsidian. He nodded. Brandon's embezzlement was real, but I requested Sentinel specifically. I wanted to work with you, to see who you were. He turned. To see if you were someone I could be proud of. A sob caught in my throat. And you are... William said, his voice breaking. God, Elise, you're extraordinary, brilliant and fierce and compassionate. You dismantled a corrupt man tonight without losing your humanity. You saved Raymond's life even when he didn't deserve it. He knelt beside my chair. You are everything I could have hoped for in a daughter, and I am so proud of you. I broke. 34 years of longing, of needing to hear those words, it poured out in tears. I spent my whole life trying to make him proud. I choked out. I built a company, I did everything right, and it was never enough. I know, William whispered, taking my hands. He never loved me. But I do, William said. I love you, Elise, and I will spend the rest of my life making up for the 34 years I missed. I stared at him, this stranger who was my father, and saw something I'd never seen in Raymond's eyes. Love. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. Neither do I. William admitted, but we'll figure it out. Together. He stood and gently pulled me to my feet. Then he wrapped his arms around me, and I let him. I let this man, this father I'd never known, hold me while I cried. I let myself feel 34 years of absence and the fragile hope of something new. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. When I pulled back, William handed me a handkerchief. I laughed through my tears. A handkerchief, very old school. He smiled. I'm 66, I'm allowed. I wiped my eyes. What happens now? Now we take it one day at a time, William said. You have a son waiting downstairs, a life to live, and I'd like to be part of that life, not as a stranger, not as a business partner, but as your father. I looked at him and nodded. I'd like that, I whispered. William's eyes filled with tears. Good, that's good. I turned toward the door. I should go. Julian's waiting. Elise, I paused. Thank you, he said, for giving me a chance. I smiled, small, fragile, but real. Thank you for wanting one. I walked back through the lobby and out into the cool Boston night. Nicole and Julian waited by the Bentley. Julian looked up, concern in his eyes. Mom, are you okay? I knelt and pulled him into a hug. Yeah, baby, I whispered. I'm okay. More than okay. For the first time in 34 years, I had a father who was proud of me. And that changed everything. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday morning in late June, I stood in my penthouse overlooking Boston and watched the city wake up. The skyline stretched before me, glass towers catching the sun, the Charles River winding like silver, the State House dome gleaming. From the 28th floor, the world looked manageable. Mine. Behind me, Julian sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by colored pencils. He was drawing. I knelt beside him. What are you working on? He looked up, face bright. A castle. He held up the sketchbook. The drawing showed turrets and towers, a drawbridge flags flying. He'd colored it blues and golds with green hills around the base. It's beautiful. This is our castle, Mom, Julian said seriously. This tower is your office. This one is my room. And this, he pointed to a small figure. This is us. We're safe inside. My throat tightened. Yes, we are. The sketchbook was new, thick, leather-bound, his initials embossed in gold, JCB, Julian Cole Bennett. The old one, the one Cody and Cameron tore, was gone. Some things couldn't be repaired, only replaced. Julian deserved better than torn pages. He deserved a fresh start. My phone buzzed. I answered. Nicole, good morning. Morning, boss. Weekly update. Go ahead. Brandon Whitfield was indicted yesterday. Federal charges, wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. His lawyer wants trial, but the evidence is airtight, 10 to 15 years minimum. I nodded. And Amber. 1 bedroom in Alston, working retail at Whole Foods, $18 an hour. The twins are enrolled in public school for fall. $37,000 a year, from country clubs to minimum wage. Your parents are renting from you. 285 Chestnut, $900 a month. $900 for a house worth $700,000. Mercy. Raymond's on pension. Diane's substitute teaching. They're humbled. I wanted them aware, to understand what they'd lost, and to live with it. William called, Nicole continued. Lunch next Sunday. He wants to take Julian to the aquarium first. I smiled. Tell him yes. Will do. I hung up. Julian was still drawing. I sat beside him. Mom, he said without looking up. Yeah, baby. Why were they so mean to us? I froze. He kept coloring, but tension showed in his shoulders. Who's sweetheart? Grandma and Grandpa, Aunt Amber, Uncle Brandon. He paused. Why didn't they like us? I took a breath. They were so focused on appearances and status that they forgot what really mattered. People, kindness, love. Do they see us now? I tilted his chin up. Yes, they see us now. Are we safe now, Mom? The question hit hard. Yes, I whispered, pulling him into my lap. We're safe, and we're home. He leaned against me. I like our castle. Me too, baby. Morning sun streamed through the windows. The city hummed below. Julian looked at me with serious eyes. What if people are mean to me again? I smoothed his hair back. Then remember this. You don't need their approval. You don't need anyone to tell you you're worthy. You already are. You just need to know it yourself. He nodded slowly. And when people underestimate you, let them. Because the higher they think they stand, the harder they fall. Like Uncle Brandon. Okay. Huh? He slid off my lap and went back to drawing, adding a bright sun with long rays. I watched him, this boy who'd been torn down, now building castles. I hadn't just taught him survival, I'd taught him power. Real power comes from knowing your worth, from standing up, from refusing to be invisible. Julian would never be invisible again. I stood and walked to the window. Boston stretched before me, my city, my kingdom. Sentinel was thriving. 3 new clients this week. The gala had made us enforcers of truth. William and I had lunch twice a month now, building something new, a foundation. My parents were learning to live without safety nets, without the daughter they'd dismissed. I didn't gloat, but I didn't regret it either. Justice wasn't revenge. It was balance, and the scales were finally even. Behind me, Julian hummed as he colored, a happy sound, a safe sound. Julian. Yeah, Mom, I love you. He grinned. I love you too. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. This is our kingdom now, I whispered, and no one can take it away. Julian hugged back fierce and strong. Our castle, our castle. As I held my son and looked over the city, our city, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped fighting for people who didn't deserve me, and I'd started building a life with people who did. And to you, listening to this story, remember this. When I started this journey, I thought family revenge was about destruction, about tearing down the people who hurt me. But God showed me something different. He showed me that real justice isn't about revenge, it's about truth. It's about standing up for yourself while still showing mercy. I mentioned God 3 times in this reflection because He was there 3 times when I needed Him most. When I paid for my father's surgery anonymously, when I chose to let my parents rent instead of destroying them completely, and when I found the strength to forgive not for them but for myself. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound. When the people who should love you most treat you like you're invisible, it leaves scars. But here's what I learned. Their betrayal doesn't define your worth. Their inability to see you doesn't make you invisible. And their family revenge, the way they punished me for simply existing, taught me that some families are built, not born. Don't do what I did. Don't spend 34 years begging for approval from people who will never give it. Know your worth sooner. Walk away faster. Build your castle earlier. Because here's the truth, you don't need their validation. You need God's grace and your own strength. And when people underestimate you, let them. The higher they stand, the harder they fall. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you experienced family betrayal? How did you find healing? Subscribe to this channel for more stories about resilience, justice, and finding your worth. Hit that share button if you know someone who needs to hear this message. Thank you for staying until the end. Your time matters, and I'm honored you spent it here. Disclaimer. The stories on this channel contain fictional elements created for educational and inspirational purposes. If this content isn't for you, feel free to explore other videos that better suit your preferences.